So you are one of the leading MMT scholars, I would say, in the world, maybe. Is that fair? I mean, you might disagree with me because you're a humble guy, but I think that's fair to say.
I teach modern monetary theory at a university. I'm not one of the developers of modern monetary theory. It's fair to say that I know or have met all the developers, but and it's also fair to say that I knew them before MMT was really fashionable and everybody knew about it. So yeah, I've been doing it for a long time.
So before we get into MMT land, let's start where I feel like is the basis of all this, and this kind of calls back to a conversation you and I had at a bar. What is the most basic misconception people have when it comes to money?
Well, the most basic thing that people misunderstand is the importance of the distinction between a currency issuer and a currency user. So you and I and businesses and not-for-profit organizations and even state governments like California's government and South Australia's government are currency users, not currency issuers. So before we can spend dollars, we have to go and get them. We have to earn them, or we have to have saved them up in the past, or we can go and borrow them. But if we borrow them, we've got to pay them back in the future with interest, and that'll be a burden on us in the future, and we could even become insolvent and go bankrupt. That's not true of the federal government. It's not true of the Australian federal government, which is the monopoly issuer of the Australian dollar. It's not true of the US government, which is the monopoly issuer of the US dollar. They're currency issuers, not currency users. They don't have to go and find dollars before they spend them. And in fact, in a sense, it's the other way around. Before dollars are available to the private sector to use or to pay their taxes, federal taxes to the government, the federal government has to spend those dollars into circulation, because you can't pay your taxes with non-existent dollars. And I know people talk about private banks creating money, but federal taxes are paid with dollars held in reserve accounts at the Federal Reserve, with federal funds, in other words. And those only come from the Federal Reserve itself or the federal government, nowhere else. So the government or its central bank has to spend dollars into circulation or lend dollars into circulation before they're available to pay taxes or to buy government bonds. That's the way round it goes. And the federal government can't ever run out of dollars. And everybody from Alan Greenspan to Stephanie Kelton to Warren Mosler to William Mitchell will tell you that, because it's just a pure fact. What that means is that when it comes to federal spending...
Is there a tea kettle where you are or something? Do you hear that?
No, that's a distant... I live in a really nice house, but the reason why I can afford this really nice house is that there is a railway line outside.
Oh,
which doesn't it doesn't have commuter trains running along it, but it has the freight trains from Adelaide to Melbourne.
Okay, so that's a train we're hearing. All right,
that's right. It's on its way to Melbourne. I don't know what it's Melbourne is not coronavirus free, so it's a very different country over there, or state. But there is a train that's on its way there, which has just gone by. Very long.
Oh, got it. I thought it was like a tea kettle or something, and I was like, Steven, if you got some tea on, go ahead, grab it. I don't want it. You know, when I was in Adelaide, I had an incident with a toaster, so I have appliance moments in Adelaide, so I wouldn't want you to have one.
You nearly burnt the house down. Yeah,
I did.
No, it's a half a mile long tea kettle, if it's a tea kettle, but it's gone.
Right,
it's gone now. As I was saying, if the federal government wishes to continue, and they are withdrawing that support at the moment unless they get their act together in Washington, D.C. If they wish to continue to support state governments and people in the US, then the only issue with doing that is that although they can't run out of dollars, they can run out of things to buy with those dollars. So the US can run out of real productive resources. And so under those circumstances, if there's too much spending in the US, it could be inflationary. There's no significant issue with that at the moment. And in the long run, as the US, I hope, under some future administration, and I think we both agree that neither of the options are very attractive at the moment, under some future administration, if the government moves towards enacting a genuine Green New Deal, then there are a lot of ways to free up productive capacity in the US to allow for the necessary investments. You could ban fracking and offshore drilling, end fossil fuel subsidies, go ahead with Medicare for all and crack down on the pharmaceutical companies, break up your major banks, engage in a series of banking reforms, criminal justice reforms, even cut military spending, because you really don't need to spend nearly as much as you do from the point of view of national defense. All those things, it's not a question of using up dollars that the government wouldn't have otherwise, but they all use up people and equipment and natural resources and other real resources, which you could free up, and then President Ocasio-Cortez or somebody like that, one day I hope will be in a position to deploy those real resources to rapidly transition to renewables, ensure everybody has healthcare and everybody has a secure income, and issues like homelessness are dealt with, and people have access to free education up to and including going to college and all those kind of things. You can afford to do those things.
Right. So you turned me on to the work of David Graeber, and in particular the book Debt, which I did read. It took me a minute and I had to go over things a couple times depending on the chapter. But it seemed like one of the themes in that book was he talked about how there has always been some form of currency just as a way of keeping track of exchanges. So really, like, the whole point of it, when, government got involved and when policies got involved and taxation got involved, it was basically kind of a mechanism to just tally control. Is that accurate, or is that like incomplete, or?
Well, it goes David's book, and he was a tremendous loss. I didn't know him personally, but we had friends in common, and it's just to lose him, someone who'd done all that good work and had so much still to give so young. It was a terrible tragedy. But David's book, amongst other things, drawing on the work of the MMT scholar Michael Hudson, amongst other people, it goes back into the ancient history of the emergence of money, and backs up that ancient history by references to modern anthropology in communities that have been only been invaded by what we might call the modern world in the last 100 years or so, and talks about the fact that money emerged maybe 5,000 years ago, maybe a bit more than 5,000 years ago, after the emergence of farming in the Middle East and food and surpluses from farming, so that not everybody had to be involved in hunting or gathering food now. It was possible to support more people than were involved in food production, which allowed for the emergence of early religions, temple communities, the earliest forms of government with public servants and soldiers, and those people had to be provisioned for, and that involved accounting. It also involved a form of taxation. So there were wars, and people who lost those wars had to pay tributes to the growing empire that had won the war, and those tributes were initially measured, although they weren't always paid, in terms of weight of barley or other agricultural crop, and that weight of barley was the first unit of account. You didn't have to pay your taxes or your tribute in physical units of barley, but shekels of barley were used to value the payment that you made to the government. And then so basically agriculture led to early forms of government, which led to war, numeracy, accounting, taxation, and money as a unit of account, which is what you were talking about, a way of recording or accounting for transactions, was the way in which those early tax payments were assessed. We're being a little bit oversimplistic here because, as you just said, it's a very long book and it's a complicated story.
Sure.
But yeah, and if you want to, in a modern context, as people often talk about, our monetary system has similarities to the point system when you're recording points in a basketball game. And so, as we were saying before, just as the federal government can't run out of dollars, so if you're playing a basketball game, they don't ever end the game early because you run out of points to put up on the system. And our modern monetary system is just really, as Warren Mosler often says, a huge spreadsheet. You just need a few $100 worth of software and you can simulate a modern monetary system. And the creation of currency by the currency issuer is no more complicated than typing some numbers into a cell on a spreadsheet. And you're right, after that, it's just basically an accounting system. It's not a commodity that we can run out of. Money isn't gold, although gold and other commodities have played a role historically in monetary systems. They've never been money. Money has always been, or currencies anyway, have always been that which is necessary to pay your taxes to a central governmental authority. And again, we're back to what you were talking about, really. They're just a way of recording transactions, credits and debts. It makes sense for the private sector to do its accounting in the same units that the government accounts for our tax liabilities. And while it's not inevitable that always has to be the case in every society, historically, that's what has been the case.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it all